Hello everyone. I should like to express my gratitude to the organizers who's been doing great work for years, in particular to Ana Misic and Misha Akoche. Unfortunately, due to pandemic, we will not be able to meet up, but at least we'll be able to exchange some of our ideas and do new research. Today, I will be talking about the Byzantine churches in Nicaea. Nicaea was established in 4th century BC. After the death of Alexander the Great, his generals divided the empire amongst themselves, and one of them, Antigonus Monophthalmos, has established a city and named after himself as Antigonia, but soon afterwards he lost in the civil war against the Lysimachos, who renamed the city by making use of his wife's name, and it became Nicaea. Nicaea was established in 4th century, and it became part of the Bithynian kingdom, and finally it became a Roman province. Unfortunately, none of the surviving monuments are from that period. Most probably they had the city walls, but either the current city walls, which are mostly from 11th century, are on the same location. That's why we won't be able to see any traces of the former ones, or they were ruined badly and they were reused as a construction material. That's why they did not last. At the end of the 19th century, some of the photographs indicate how the city looks. It's in a very flat area. Western section is the lake. And this monument, this sarcophagus, is believed to be one of the Bithynian kings' sarcophagus. It was a large one, and sadly it was destroyed by the treasure hunters in antiquity and was relooted in modern times. Still, the graves are found during the excavations or infrastructural works there, mostly in the form of tumuli. So this is from 2006, soon after the touch of the treasure hunters. That is the location of it. And sadly, even the doors are still intact. They are functioning, but unfortunately looted. Based on Roman maps, is believed at least, Tabula Poetangirana indicates the location of Nicaea, not far from Constantinople, by the lake there. On the right-hand side, you can see in the picture. And two of the archways in the east and the northern part of the city, they have the inscriptions indicating that the founders of the city was Heracles and Dionysus. So because of that, we have Dionysus riding his chariot of elephants on the left-hand side. The city had apparently several temples, and we have the temples on the coins, and one temple in particular, Temple of Apollo, was outside the city. Unfortunately, we don't know whereabouts of it. In the middle of 3rd century, Goths attacked the city, and when the city defended itself, part of the city walls were in ruins, so they were restored or redone. So in order to commemorate that event, we have some coins indicating that there are city walls repaired or redone in 3rd century. Today, the looks of the city is like this. Most of the city walls are intact, and today's population of Nicaea, or Iznik, is approximately around 40,000 people. At the end of the 19th century, one of the main gates, Istanbul Gate, one gate after the other, they have the outer gate, which had parts of the monuments from sarcophagi, or most probably from the victory monument against the Goths, and part of it are also in another gate called Lefke Gate. Just before reaching the city from the north, from the direction of Istanbul, there is this monument known as Beştaş, 5 stone blocks as it is in Turkish. This is to indicate the burial place of one of the family members of Cassius, just like Cassius Dio. They were originally from Nicaea. And this was acting as a lighthouse to the pilgrims or the travelers just before entering the city, and they were putting their marks there. Some of them were pilgrims, some of them were merchants, but sometimes we have the graffiti or the crosses there. Another grave was from the northern cemetery of the city, from the El Beyli area. So this was looted several times in order to protect it. The local museum decided to encapsulate it within a modern building there. Thanks to that, it's protected now. But just before that, the Kantaros in the lower part, or the Christogram in the upper part, have been destroyed by the treasure hunters, thinking that behind that there is the gold. In the year 2008, a new discovery was made in the cemetery there. The entire family, whose skeletons you can see with their funeral gifts, have been discovered with the depiction of Good Shepherd there. The city had a colonnaded street, and it had the grid plan. Between north and south and east and west, they had the intersection. At the meeting point, there must have been a tetrapylon. Based on the other examples, I suggested the looks of it, just like the one on the right-hand side. In 1830s, the French architect and traveler, Charles Texier, came to this city, and he drew the plan of the city, showing the population was mostly in the central part of the city. But it's interesting to see in the northern western part of the city, there's a triangular area, which I believe was the location for the palace. Because this city must have had a palace, as Constantine reorganized the system there. So this should have been the place, perfect place for the palace. Why do I say that? Because we have other examples from Constantinople. Part of the Great Palace, namely Bucolion Palace, was by the sea. Diocletian had two palaces, one of them in Spalato, in Split, and the other one is in Nicomedia, both faced towards the sea. So the sea or the lake or river was not considered to be a weak point, but had the nice view. So by basing on that, I suggested the drawing on the right-hand side, thanks to Tayfun Öner, who also makes Byzantium 1200. So we made a suggestion how the palace might have looked like. Why palace is important? Because that was the place where the first ecumenical council was held. So this is the fresco recently discovered in Antalya, in Demre, in the Church of St. Nicholas, so showing some scenes from the first ecumenical council there. It's interesting also, we have an 8th century English traveler called Willibald saying that there were lots of similarities between the Church of Holy Fathers, where the participants of the first ecumenical council was depicted, and the Church of Ascension. So Church of Ascension probably had a circular building surrounding it, much more larger than this one, in the form of rotunda. And because of that, some people suggest that the first council was held in Nicaea in a circular building, in a large one, like, if not like size-wise Pantheon, but at least the idea was like that one there. But not in that opinion. So we have another city, which is location-wise like Nicaea. This is Trier, facing to the river. On the left-hand side, it had the city walls there, and it's the grid form. It's at the monumental archway, and it had a civic basilica at the moment being used as the church. And I believe the first council of Nicaea was held in a civic basilica like this one there. And we have another example from 1960s where the second council of Vatican was held. Based on the information, I suggested the looks of the city might have been like this one, in 10th century at least. So we have here a rather new photograph I discovered. First, we have the city walls, then the white building. It is the church dedicated to Mother of God. And just behind it, there are tall ruined buildings. Either they were part of a palace or part of the Roman bath. Both are suitable for that. The first church within Iznik is Hagia Sophia. First time Turks captured this city was in the year 1081. Those were Seljuks and remained here for 16 years. After 16 years, they were expelled by the combined forces of the Crusaders and the Byzantines, and the city was handed over back to the Byzantines. The second was in the year 1331. This time, Orhan or the Ottomans captured the city, and soon after the conquest, this church served as the main church of the city for centuries, turned into a mosque. In 1950s, it was in dilapidating situation. It lost its roof, and it was not in good shape. Thanks to the restorations of 2008 onwards, we have the roof and several parts of it have been restored. The church has 3 phases. In the restorations of 1950s, in a window sill, they found some dedicatory inscription dated to 6th century. We have the bima, and of course we have the cintron on here with mosaic. That's considered to be from 6th century. and probably an 11th century section was added there after the earthquake of 1065, and a 13th century one was followed. So this is a fresco from northwestern part of the church, and it's an arcosolium, but the lower part is sunken because of the increased the level of the ground. At the western entrance, there is the mosaic there, that we will come back to this, but this is from the third phase of the church. Inside, there are also frescoes there, but unfortunately frescoes have never been studied. We have the haloed figures, those apparently are saints, but we have the angelic figures as well. So sadly, they expect to be studied more carefully. So this is a general view before the restoration of 6th century apse, synchronon, and the mosaic in it. Very similar to this mosaic, we will come back at the end of this speech. At the moment, it's functioning as a mosque, but you can see and visit this place as a tourist as you enter. In the southern section of it, there is an annex. So this is the Paracelsian. Apparently, the church had financial difficulties. When it was having dire times, they needed to have the support of someone. In return for burial, that person poured money to beautify or to restore this building. And the funeral ground was also beautified by the mosaics, as you can see on the picture on the right-hand side. During the restorations of 2008 onwards, they found by the window sills the traces of geometrical pattern frescoes. One of the most interesting details of the mosaics in the western entrance is the fleur de lis pattern. This flower is nearly the insignia or the trademark of the Lascaris dynasty, who also used it on their coins in the lower photograph you can see. When the Fourth Crusaders captured the city of Constantinople, there were several Byzantine families who were fighting for the power. One of them was Lascaris. Theodoros Lascaris wanted to take refuge in Nicaea and wanted to establish his center of power there, but he was not welcomed by the citizens. But soon afterwards, in 2 years' time, he came back there, and in 1208, he was declared as the new emperor, and he established a dynasty based on his name. This is one of the rarest photographs of 19th century and early 20th century from the Church of Mother of God, Kimesis, and sometimes known as the Monastery of Hyakinthos or Hyakinthos, because he was the one who paid for the construction of it. At the end of World War I, Greeks and Turks had committed several atrocities. Greeks burned several mosques and destroyed them. As a retaliation, when the Turks took the control of the area, they destroyed this church. So before it was destroyed, these are the photographs showing what kind of a structure it was. For the first time, it was recorded by the British Dr. John Cowell. He made sketches of the looks of it and the plan of it. And inside, in the apse, in the semicircle of the apse, we have the Virgin Mary. And it's interesting to see the mosaics there have also 3 phases. One of them most probably pre-iconoclastic or early iconoclastic. Then it was replaced by the cross, as you can see in the drawing on the left-hand side. And after iconoclastic period, we have Virgin Mary again. Not only she, but we have also angelic figures there as well. And soon after the discovery of this mosaic in the year 1911, the church was destroyed in 1921. So this was one of the latest discoveries. That's the way it looks. And that's how it is now when there is no weed covering the area. Another church by the southern gate of the city, near the gate of Yenişehir, is called as Trifonos. We have no dedicatory inscription, hence we cannot suggest anything, but based on what remained there, we can suggest that it was in the plan of Ciborium. So we had the Ciborium type of church, not only here, but also in Constantinople. The best example is Hora. So based on this, so I suggested the drawings and the original looks of the church must have been like this one. Not far from there is the theater. Just roughly around 50 meters away from theater, there was the substructure of a large building there. At first, its function was not understood, but careful measurement indicated that this was a church. And as a result, I suggested the looks of the church is like this one, a basilical one, a large-scale basilical church. And in the year 1946, in the northwestern part of the city, near Istanbul Gate, walls of the height nearly 2 meters of a church was discovered. There was no name suggested for that. On the left-hand side, its present situation. Little by little, the pieces are disappearing. And when it was discovered, that's the plan suggested, with Paraklesia added. And that's the original looks are suggested, how it looks. There's one team of Istanbul University whose intention was to find the Ottoman period pottery kilns and pottery techniques. They started to work in the area in 1960s. Thanks to them, whenever there was an ongoing construction, whenever an infrastructural work was done, they were always present within the city. Because of them, we are able to find or locate some of the unknown churches. For instance, this was from northwestern part of the city, from the area, and they found this church with burials underneath there, carved on the main rock. And another church came in 1988, within the seats of the Roman theatre. On the left-hand side, you can see there. But theatre was not in use anymore, so it was a dumping ground of the bodies, and then it became proper cemetery, not only for Christians, but also for Muslims. Most probably when it was under Turkish control, so those who died, they were buried there. Another unknown church from the pottery kiln team from northwestern part of the city was found. This time it came with substructures. The sub-chambers have the skeletons inside there, most probably belong to the monks who served in this monastic church. At the orchestra level in the narrow gallery here, in the year 2005, they discovered traces of frescoes, just like the one on the right-hand side. That's the one Virgin Mary, holding Jesus Christ. And on the left-hand side, we have traces of frescoes indicating some structures. And on the left-hand side, we have the dedicatory inscription, Lord Save Us. During the restorations of 2008 by Lefke Kapı, they found a tripartite Byzantine church whose two apses were visible. By simply making a look at it, I suggest the looks of it, just like in the photograph on the left-hand side. It's a church from Crete. Probably it was as simple as that one. That's why I put there. During an international summer school, a geophysical research team suggested they discovered a Middle Byzantine cross in square church. The shape of it may be acceptable, but the date, by simply looking at the geophysical research, I believe should be approached by caution, because the same plan type is still used when a new church in Orthodox countries are constructed. One of the nicest surprises came in the year 2014. Greater municipality of Bursa had an airplane for photographing the townships under Bursa, and the lower level of water allowed this church to be visible, although locals knew that there were some remains of some structures, but they couldn't identify it. So luckily in 2014, a church was discovered there, and it was suggested to belong to Neophytos. Aios Neophytos was martyred just before Christianity was legalized, and there was the church dedicated to him just outside the city walls, and he was there to protect the people from the dangers coming from outside, in particular from the lakes. Based on that, it was suggested that this could have been the church dedicated to him, and the excavators currently date it to 4th century. The excavation still continues. As you can see, it's a tripartite church, a rather interesting apse there. And new discovery was made by myself in 2018. The museum, local museum itself, is a historical monument from 14th century, an imaret, just behind the trees, was not big enough to house the collections, so they wanted to enlarge the museum. As they were doing that, they wanted to make use of this space, but they came across with a Byzantine workshop and Byzantine street, and finally a Byzantine church. That's the one on the left-hand side. And unfortunately, northern part of this church is under the street, and it was in ruins. But luckily, we were able to see some of the sections there. This entire area is filled in with the earth now, because a new museum building will be built in a different location where there's not much of history underneath. So this same type of mosaic on the ground is exactly the same technique, same material as Hagia Sophia. And it may be an indication of an early 6th century construction. Why 6th century? Because by 6th century, earthquakes damaged the city badly, and Justinian poured money to beautify the buildings, which are already in existence, and restored the water system and the palace and churches and monasteries. So we have here a roof tiled section in the photograph there. Underneath is a skeleton. There were 27 skeletons found within the church area here. And unfortunately, half of the skeletons under the road. So that's why this grave is not accessible. As I was in the area, I was approached and I was asked my opinion during the restoration works of Istanbul Kapı. When they were lowering the earth level, they came across with some ruins they couldn't identify. And I suggested this is a tripartite Byzantine church there. The hole in the ground indicates that there was the column stuck there, and on top there was the table, the altar table there. The last discovery is made by myself in the garden of the museum. This piece came from the northern part of the city, outside the city, from the necropolis area there. The inscription, it says that she made this donation by expecting to be forgiven from her sins to the Church of Mother of God and to the Holy Ayasma, to the holy water there. So now we have a problem because in the necropolis area in the north, we have no church there. Either this piece was brought from one of the churches from Nicaea itself, dumped there and came back by pure chance, or there was a church which is unrecorded. Shortly, where the red dots are, indicating where the churches of Nicaea at the moment are, the number probably will increase by time, and especially in the western part of the city, in the northwestern part of the city, where the palace are suggested to be. That's an important place. I believe that was the place where the first ecumenical council was held, within a basilical building there. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. This is my address, and enjoy your speeches afterwards.